Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. That's right, this is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. Happy to be here with you today. Quickly, if you have not been here before, just to let you know, we do free-form, long-form political commentary on this program. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we speak with you directly in a live stream on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, reaching out and listening to your voice and making sure that you are heard. Today, though, we're going to be speaking about something that's been in the news. A lot of people are looking at it. It's Thanksgiving and the various governors across the country. It's a very interesting kind of concept here, a very interesting question we have facing us as a nation. We know that for many months now, obviously for almost the entire year, we have been dealing with COVID-19, the coronavirus, and its ramifications. Individuals that have died from that are over 200,000, almost 250,000 people. It is a troubling disease, and it's led to some of the greatest restrictions and freedom that we have seen ever in this nation. So what has truly been the impact, and how is that going to affect our Thanksgiving and our governments at the local and state levels? It's a very interesting question. Not a lot of people are dealing with this, and I believe we should take that on. So going with that, let's start off, first of all, what we know for sure. And if you're wondering, in the comments will be links in the YouTube comments. You will see a description of all of the links that we have for this program and everything we're showing you so you can see it for yourself. We're starting off with New York State, the GIVE report. It's a report that not many people look at. And this is something we generally look at whenever we're talking about gun control, especially in New York State. It is the New York State Gun-Involved Violence Elimination Initiative, and it is issued from July 1st. This is the current data. There is a final report that will come at the end of the year. But this data goes through March of 2020. And in particular, what we want to look at here is one of the consequences of the shutdowns, the lockdowns that occurred in New York State as well as across the country. And we believe this is a pretty fair representation, because no one has been talking about the domestic violence that has happened as a consequence of lockdowns. We know that initially there were some reports, and then there has been complete silence across the news media about this. What we can see very clearly stated in the GIVE report from New York, which covers the 17 largest cities in New York State, what they're saying is very clearly that there was a 32% increase in the number of domestic violence reported assaults in New York State. That is a huge increase, and that was just as of March 20th of 2020. We believe that number has done nothing but increase, according to all media that we have heard. That's huge. So we know that, and it's very clear, that we went into a lockdown. That lockdown was to prevent problems for the public, to ensure the safety of the public. What we have seen as a consequence, as shown in the GIVE report, even from the very beginning, domestic abuse increased by 30%. We had similar increases in the number of drug and alcohol abuse notifications. We saw a much larger increase in the number of violent crimes, especially crimes involving firearms. And in fact, in an analysis of that, as reported by CNBC on October 15th, lockdowns should be a very, very last resort. This came from the WHO, World Health Organization's European chief, stating that lockdowns are a direct risk and create collateral damage, that collateral damage being domestic abuse, drug and alcohol addiction, and violent crimes going higher and higher. That is what we've gotten from the lockdowns. Now, a lot of people have tried to downplay this But the fact is, we've heard from many doctors, organizations, that we are seeing these consequences. To lockdown has caused, and this is not even looking at the economic impact of the lockdowns, of the restrictions that have been created because of COVID-19. So when we look at this, we have to understand we have created a scenario because of the restrictions of COVID-19 that have impacted 10 times or more, actually many more people than have ever been affected by COVID-19 and those who have died. Now, we do understand any death is a sad thing, and it is something that we have to take account for. You know, if a death can be prevented easily without harm to others, of course, we would advocate that being done. But harm is being done to others. And we are seeing dramatic impacts, not just in the economics of our nation and the world, not just in the domestic abuse and the violence, both with and without guns in our nation, not only in drug addiction, which impacts families and communities throughout the nation and across the world. We're also seeing problems in our government and our freedoms. In fact, when we spoke about this back on, I believe it was November 11th that we had brought this up. On November 11th, we talked about Governor Cuomo and his violation of the Fourth Amendment. And that's the issue for today, because it has brought up many questions for the public about whether or not we should see various governors impeached and removed because of overreaches of government. Now, we've seen this in many places, including the overreach at the local levels. As an example, in Broome County, where County Executive Jason Garnar gave the unofficial, official statement that the public should be in solitary confinement every other day because of protecting the public from COVID-19, which effectively did not happen and could not work. But that was a blatant overreach of government power. He called it the Operation Crush COVID. And by any name, it is an overreach of government power. And we saw this at local communities throughout the nation, as well as at the state level as well. In fact, it's been so bad that we had to take a moment to think about this. And it was back on November 12th when we mentioned on Facebook a very simple thing. As we said, simple logic. If lockdowns work, COVID-19 would have been stopped in the spring. Domestic abuse and suicides have grown almost exponentially as a result, while small businesses have crashed. 6 weeks of national lockdown, as has been proposed by the potential Biden administration coming in, will destroy millions as collateral damage and resolve nothing. And again, that's going back to what the WHO, the World Health Organization, had already said. Lockdowns are dangerous and cause direct collateral damage that impact the mental health and domestic violence throughout the world. This is a serious subject. It is a serious issue. In fact, all of the restrictions from the coronavirus have led Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito to speak out about these threats to our freedom and our religious liberty. And he spoke, and as quoted by the New York Post on November 13th, we see he was stating, quote, "The pandemic has resulted in previously unimaginable restrictions on personal liberty." He goes on to say, "We have never before seen restrictions as severe, extensive, and prolonged as those experienced for most of 2020. Whatever one may think about the COVID restrictions, we surely don't want them to become a recurring feature after the pandemic has passed." And a good question would be, will the pandemic ever pass? It's a good question. When might we ever see this happen? Because if the coronavirus is similar to the swine flu, H1N1, the bird flu, if we're talking about the regular flu, we see vaccines that exist. And every year, millions of people, tens of millions of people worldwide are still affected. We know every year people get flu vaccines, and every year millions of Americans are affected. Thousands, tens of thousands of Americans die every year from the flu. Vaccines, no matter how supposedly effective, are not 100%. COVID will never go away, COVID-19. And in fact, COVID is the 19th version of the coronavirus that we're dealing with. There will eventually be a COVID-20 and a COVID-21, and so on and so on. That is the nature of viruses in the world. So will there ever be a true end to the coronavirus? Not necessarily, especially as we hear individuals like Prime Minister Trudeau mentioning that the virus, the pandemic, the fear is a reason for a reset of the world, resetting our freedoms, our liberties, our economies for some new system that no one has a clear answer on, but seems to indicate socialism and communism, which on this program we disagree with. But that being said, there is no question that Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito has a point. Whatever we may think about the COVID restrictions, we surely don't want them to become a recurring feature where we have power isolated into a small group of individuals that have absolute power, such as Governor Cuomo, or such as Governor Whitmer, or such as Governor Newsom. These are individuals who have taken absolute power into their hands, removing the individuals who are routinely expected, our legislatures, who are routinely expected to take care of the public. In fact, we see that the backlash has been extreme. Governor Newsom, in particular, has been subjected to, or identified as, one of the governors whose overreach of power has led to the state courts overruling her COVID-19 restrictions, that she has taken too much power from the public, and therefore her actions were unconstitutional. Now we see that in result of that, because of her unconstitutional actions, we have seen that several Republicans in the state of Michigan are looking to have an impeachment of Governor Whitmer. This is important. And this is for the growing list of violations. And it is, according to legislator Maddock, long overdue. And that's a problem, because these restrictions have led to an unknown number of deaths in Michigan alone. It's estimated somewhere between 4,000 or more nursing home deaths, very similar to what happened in New York State, with over 12,000 nursing home deaths directly attributed to the actions of the governor and the extreme executive powers that they have taken as emergency powers, eliminating the rest of the duly elected representatives of the public. Going further, we see that the response of Governor Whitmer to these individuals responding and saying that she should be impeached for violating the Constitution of Michigan and the United States, her office responded, and I quote, "Governor Whitmer doesn't have any time for partisan politics or people who don't wear masks, don't believe in science, and don't have a plan to fight the virus. Right now, she is focused on saving lives. The governor will continue to work hard for all 10 million Michiganders. This is about Michigan versus COVID-19. Governor Whitmer doesn't care if you're a Trump Republican or a Biden Democrat. We are all in this together." Let's think about that statement for a moment. Governor Whitmer says she doesn't have time for people who don't wear masks. Those are people in Michigan. Those are people in the United States. There are people, because of their freedom, because of their low chance of catching and or being killed by COVID-19, that oppose it. There are people who have medical conditions that prevent them from wearing masks. And Governor Whitmer is saying that she doesn't have time for these individuals. Are they not still voters? Are they not still constituents of the governor? Are they not the people that voted, some of them maybe, voted for Governor Whitmer? And even if they didn't, is she not still responsible to her constituents? She is obligated to work for the people of Michigan. Is that not the definition of the job? How dare she say that she is not obligated to abide by or even consider the voices of her constituents, the people she is obligated to be informed. That's why she's in office. She's obligated to be concerned about these individuals, regardless of their political or personal feelings. It is in her position to do the job for everyone, regardless of how she may feel about their political preferences, their religious preferences, their race, creed, color, sex, sexual preference, and whether or not they wear a mask, which is in question according to many medical professionals across the world. And in particular, going back to her statement about not believing in the science has come from the WHO saying that lockdowns are should be a very, very last resort because of the collateral damage. In other words, the domestic abuse, the violent crimes, and drug addictions that we see as a consequence. Governor Whitmer, it would seem, has made a violation. And to be very clear, what we see that she did, according to the state's highest court, there was a 4-3 ruling stating that her use of the 1945 Emergency Powers Act, Emergent Powers of the Governors Act, is unconstitutional. The court, a court of 7 judges, unanimously, and these are judges of all political parties, unanimously agreed that separately, the 1976 Emergency Management Act that Governor Whitmer used to impose unconstitutional rules on the public did not give her the power after April 30th to renew or issue executive orders related to the COVID-19 pandemic without the approval of the legislature and, in other words, the public. This is all very clear. So why are we seeing the elected officials seek to have an impeachment? Well, very clearly, under the regulations of the Constitution of Michigan in 1963, the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeaching civil officers for corrupt conduct in office. Full stop. She has committed corrupt conduct. She violated the Constitution of Michigan and or the United States. She has stated that she has no concern for her constituents that she is obligated to protect and have their best interest. She has misused her executive orders and overreached the power of the government. These are corrupt conduct actions, and therefore she is liable and capable of being impeached. And therefore, there is the ability of the members of the House of Representatives and the state Senate to go forward and to impeach her. This is very clear. To say that this is partisan is to ignore that she has been struck down by the courts, that she has been found to be unconstitutional, to have overreached her power, to have committed corrupt conduct as per the Michigan Constitution. That is a fact. And therefore, she should be impeached, we believe, because the COVID-19 restrictions have gone too far. What about in California, though? What about in California, where we see Governor Newsom has decided that gatherings are too much, that in Thanksgiving, you're not allowed to go out and to visit your families. And to be more exact, that all gatherings must include no more than 3 households, including hosts and guests, and must be held outdoors, lasting no longer than 2 hours. That is what he decided. And this is as reported by Newsweek on California Governor Newsom's Thanksgiving rules, and they are severe restrictions. That was as October 22nd. This is a problem. I mean, almost so many people across this nation have family and friends that easily go over the restrictions as expressed by Governor Newsom. And many find this to be violation of the Constitution of California, an overreach of power, and an abuse of the public. And this is highlighted in particular by the recent actions of Governor Newsom when he apologized for attending the French Laundry diner, and he did not practice what he preaches, as was reported on November 16th, a month after he put his restrictions in place for the rest of the public. And he says, quote, "I want to apologize to you because I need to preach and practice, not just preach and not practice. And I've done my best to do that. We're all human and we all fall short." Well, that's kind of interesting. How often has he fallen short? How many of these politicians are allowed to ignore the rules they place on others when they go out and do whatever they wish? Think about, from California, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who could get her hair done in a private salon, even though that salon was supposed to be shut down. How about Mayor Lightfoot of Chicago, who's able to get her hair done while all salons and all hair cutting was disallowed to the public? How many cases can we go through, city by city, area by area? How about CNN's Chris Cuomo, who was seen out on bike paths and walking around while he was under a COVID-19 restriction and isolation, and yet he didn't bother because his brother is the governor of New York and he works for a news media agency, CNN. These are problems. And Governor Newsom didn't just go to one event. Let's be very clear. As identified by Kevin Falconer and many others, his kids are going to schools. But the public are doing distance learning. That he's gone to have restaurants and meals with what are identified as registered lobbyists. But you cannot. And that he had attended a birthday party, which the public can't have. So it's not just one event, it's multiple events. And when we looked at the California legislative, their constitution and their laws, and looking at a very convoluted series of rules for the impeachment of officers, and it is very convoluted as opposed to most states, it is possible for him to be not only impeached, but also he can be impeached or disqualified for office, according to the article. Where is it? Oh, I had it. But rather than taking more time, the removal other than by impeachment. Any accusation in writing against an officer of a district, county, or city, including any member of the governing board or personal commission of a school district, for willful or corrupt misconduct in office may be presented by a grand jury of the county for which the officer is accused, elected, or appointed. That's it. In writing, an accusation in writing can be placed against, if I am understanding it correctly, Governor Newsom, to be removed even without an impeachment, although the code does allow for a removal, even if it's unlikely, because in California, the legislatures, being very democratic, would never do so. It would take a 2/3 vote. Still, he is liable and should be punished because he, in fact, has violated the same terms. He has violated his oath of office, his obligation to the public. He has overreached his power and enacted unconstitutional actions, or at least in our belief that is the case, and therefore is subject to being held to impeachment. Whether or not the state would actually follow up and do this is another question. But I believe this is important because the public is not aware that this recourse is available to them. The news media does not discuss this. The news media does not cite these sources as we are presenting for you. And you may disagree, but that is your choice. At least now you know there is law that exists on this, and it is action the public can take on this. Let's move forward. What about in New York State? In New York State, Governor Cuomo recently enacted also an overreach of government, we believe, an overreach of the Constitution of New York, and violated the terms in doing so because he said that New York State for Thanksgiving is canceled, that you cannot have a Thanksgiving, much like in Michigan, much like in California, by saying that you cannot have 10 or more people in your household who are not family members, and that's just disallowed. And as discussed in the New York Post on November 16th, we have seen that several sheriffs across New York State have already stated it is unconstitutional and they will not abide by this. They will not take this action. In particular, there was the sheriff, the Fulton County Sheriff, Richard Giardino, I apologize if I mispronounced that, saying, quote, "Frankly, I'm not sure it could sustain a constitutional challenge in court for several reasons, including your house is your castle." That's an important statement because in our conversation back on November 11th, we stated that the violation of the Fourth Amendment being proposed by Governor Cuomo is invalid and hashtag my home, hashtag my home, my castle. You cannot go in and violate our homes. You cannot violate our Fourth Amendment rights, as Governor Cuomo is suggesting, and as Sheriff Richard Giardino has already said he will not do. This is also followed by Washington County Sheriff Jeff Murphy, who said there will be no Thanksgiving enforcement. And Saratoga County Sheriff Michael Zurlo, I can't see how devoting our resources to counting cars in citizens' driveways or investigating how much turkey and dressing they've purchased is for the public good. Finally, we see Erie County Sheriff Tim Howard say, politicians acting like politicians are ignoring what the actual experts say and has been fueling the spread of this virus is what plunged the country in this continued public health crisis in the first place. Again, he's referring back to comments from the WHO, their European chief, And there's comments about the very, very last resort of conducting lockdowns and shutting people in their homes, both because of the health risk and the collateral damage. Again, the domestic abuse that we have seen has had a dramatic increase, 33%, which is rather substantial. And it only gets worse. Now, we did see the Fulton sheriff, and I did have this up before, I apologize, where he made his statement on, where is it? I skipped it. Hang on. And I apologize, folks. There it is. Where his statements, as you can see on the Fulton County Sheriff, and one of the biggest concerns is, and I believe this is true in any state, but also said very clearly here for New York State, is that an executive order applying directly to citizens for their private conduct is usually not a law in the sense that there are no penalties attached and you can't be arrested. So this, in fact, isn't enforceable. There is no crime. There is no crime being committed in Michigan, in California, in New York State, when a gathering of people, 10 or more, celebrating the Thanksgiving holiday or for no reason whatsoever, come together in a private home. That's what the Fourth Amendment is about. The government doesn't get to spy on you in your home to see whether or not you have 10 people. The government doesn't get to stop you from having that gathering. In addition, that could be also considered a First Amendment right, to the right of the public to assemble. So again, they don't have this power, these governors. It is unconstitutional. And each and every one of them who are suggesting this, we believe, should be held accountable and should be impeached, or at least that process to begin, even if the states will not allow that to happen. Now, in particular, in New York State, there is no clarity on what are the requirements for an impeachment of any official, in particular the governor. It is stated that the assembly has the power of impeachment, and if a majority of the members are elect to do so, a trial can begin. That trial would include the president of the Senate, the senators, or the majority of them, the judges of the Court of Appeals, or a majority of those individuals. It would also include the lieutenant governor, possibly the governor. But since the governor is involved, both those individuals, the governor and the lieutenant governor, would not be included. But they can be impeached because they have overreached. Governor Cuomo and the other governors, as we've mentioned, violating the Fourth Amendment, violating the First Amendment, violating the 10th Amendment. These are problems, and they should be addressed. And we've tried to find a clarity in the New York State law. It doesn't exist. The answer is the assembly shall have the power of impeachment by a vote of the majority. Now, we have a question here. We have a choice here. In looking at Michigan, in looking at California, in looking at New York, which are many of the leaders of the progressive ideals found in many of the very blue states in the Democratic Party as a whole, including Joe Biden, who may and looks to be the president-elect. They're supporting lockdowns, even though the WHO has clearly said they don't believe that that's the best thing to do. We're looking at Dr. Fauci saying that the public, as we have reported previously, that the public should be to just submit to the will of these elected officials wielding unlimited power. We disagree with that. We believe that each of these individuals need to be held accountable, that according to their own state constitutions and the regulations and laws of those states, each and every one should be held accountable and should be brought up on impeachment charges. Now, in California and New York State, will that go forward? Probably not. And the cost of that will be not only Thanksgiving, not only the businesses that have already closed, but many more that will close. It will mean that individuals are no longer free. You no longer have the right, the pursuit of happiness. You no longer have the First Amendment to gather peaceably. You no longer have the right to speak. You no longer have the right to your privacy in your home. You no longer have the right to hold the power of the government unless we elect a law which gives that government a power, the 10th Amendment. These are very serious issues and very serious concerns. We ask you not to believe us, but to look at the sources that we have provided to you, to review the information that is ongoing in the public as it's being reported by the major news media, and then to draw your own conclusion. Have these governors overreached their power? Is this unconstitutional? Does this violate your rights? And if it continues, as stated by Justice Alito, whatever we may think about COVID-19 restrictions, we surely don't want them to become a recurring feature after the pandemic has passed. The pandemic has resulted in previously unimaginable restrictions on personal liberty. If you believe that is even possibly true, or may become true, then I would suggest that we need to investigate impeachment of the governors of New York, California, and in Michigan to make the statement clear for the rest of the nation that this is unacceptable. Now, if you believe that I am incorrect, that I have misunderstood the sources and the information that I have provided to you, if you believe that I have misunderstood the need or the risk, please comment. Let us know. You can reach us on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and of course, on Sunday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can join us on our live stream and call us and leave your voice and explain why we're misunderstanding the Constitution, why we're misunderstanding the state constitutions of New York, Michigan, and California, and how the people, the public, have been abused by these individuals. We look forward to your thoughts on this. We look forward to hearing your voice. And again, hashtag my home, my castle. Thank you.